Hey, yo, what a div, y'all. Let's get right into it. And it today is how bad T17s are and how T16.5s dodge those problems, quite frankly, right? Because if you remember when it got announced, I know I said it on stream. I know a lot of people actually were like, oh, I don't know if I want those modifiers in my T16.5, T16s, man. Ooh, right? But here we are, and I feel like the outcry about 16.5s is, if it exists, which I haven't even really heard much of it, it's so much less than our feelings about 17s, which prompts the question, why? That's what this video is going to be about today, because we talked about it a bit on stream last night, actually, and it made me realize this is a really cool discussion topic to take our thoughts from stream, recollate a little bit, organize it a bit with a night of sleep, and then come to you guys to give you a rant that I haven't given a rant in a little bit. You know, that's what this channel is really built on. I know you might think of me as like the Sanctum guy. Before I was the Sanctum guy, I was a ranter. So if you're not familiar, my name is No Name. I do a lot of ranting about the game, and I love to talk about Sanctum especially, right? Let's get into it. T17s are trash, and that's not a shocking statement at all. I don't think anyone hears me go, T17s are trash, and they're like, what? I love 17s. What do you mean? Or if you do, you're lying to me, right? You love a lot of other things about 17s. You don't like 17s though, right? You like that there's, a better way to get to Uber bosses, or, you like the uniques that they provide, right? Or you like the extremely high amount of loot that they provided last league relative to the field. You don't like T17s though. And this is really heavily shown because why farm 17s when you could just farm 16.5s instead? 16.5s basically print the same amount of loot, and they just suck way less to run. And that's the proof. The proof is in that pudding, right? People are paying way more for the originator maps than they are for the 17s. And obviously because originator maps give more loot, but it's also because I think that T16.5s do what T17s were supposed to be better. And they're going to let T17s sunset into the proper role that they're supposed to be in. We'll talk about that role later. First, we need to talk about why one is so bad and one is so good when in your mind they share the same role of having these terrible mods, right? The insanely overjuiced res mod, which is pretty benign compared to the Awakener's Desolation or the Drowning Orbs on a Volatile Course or the Petrification Statues, the Saw Blades, right? You think of all of these extremely fuck-ass mods and you're like, oh my God, I hate these. But it turns out that that's not the thing alone that makes T17 suck. In 16.5s, those modifiers are just rougher. But 17s have two other things that are just worse than 16.5s, right? One, the monsters in those maps are just more brutal. Like straight up, the mob types that they put in T17s are brutal. You have those like water dragon things that are like from the, like, what is it? That one map with the dude who sparks backward. Yeah, they made a whole bunch of mobs out of that guy. And it just floods your screen with nonsense that one-shots you. Or you have the little synth robots that just flood your screen with projectiles that basically two-shot you. Or the little, like, in Fortress map, you have the little robots that shoot out the, like, detonating frost cores that stack up, like, 8 at a time and just do you and kill you, right? You've got the Devourers that leave the fizz dot puddles when they come up and down and die. You have all sorts of mobs in 17s that just suck. Right? Like the monsters themselves suck to fight against. And you don't have to deal with those in 16.5s. And on top of that, you have much better selection of layout and control of layout in 16.5s. Not to mention the actual layouts themselves are just better for a variety of builds, right? A very unifying characteristic of the 5 T17 maps that they did give us is that they're all rather confined. The least confined of the batch being Sanctuary, the Lycia map, right? That map is probably the least confined of the batch, and it's still an indoor map, right? Like if your strategy wanted to be on an outdoor map or a more open map, you don't even get the option of doing that, right? So you still lose out on that, but at least you're not in these tiny ass hallways like Abomination, or jumping over these terrible platforms like in Citadel, or just in Ziggurat as a whole, right? Or getting, again, bombed down these tiny ass hallways in the Fortress map, which I had a funny take about Fortress map on stream about how, like, you don't like Fortress map suffers the same problem that the tunnels layout and Heist did. And everybody only meat road Heist or the tunnels layout and Heist so aggressively because it was efficient, not because it was fun, right? That is a topic for a different video. I've had a lot of thoughts about that. And it's actually a sub theme of a couple different rants I have in the pipeline for things that I want to talk about. But the monsters and the layouts together make T17 so bad that the modifiers are the cherry on top. Not only do the monsters suck, not only do the layouts suck, but then you have these terrible modifiers slapped on top of it. And it's just an unfun experience. Not only do I not have fun dealing with the monsters, I don't have fun figuring out how to make the monsters dealable. Because that's right, also 17s can only be modified through basically chaos spamming them, as opposed to, oh, I don't know, out scouring them like we do with 16.5s. And so when you take away two of the three things that make T17 suck, right? The monsters and the layouts, and you let us actually roll them easier without just jettisoning 40 chaos at a time, especially in like progression or like limited resource environments such as SSF or private leagues and whatnot. It becomes really obvious why 16.5s are the obvious choice of preference. And then it helps that, the loot from 16.5s is just generally competitive or better, depending on exactly what you're prioritizing, because you still get the T17 map mods that juice up like scarab drops and map drops and whatnot. We've seen the risk farming go crazy, right? You can also see from the same idea that people are, finding incredible uses for the different, what's the word I'm looking for? The originator skills, especially with like, farming gold through the ultimate, the gilded and whatnot. Like there's that extra layer, and then the drops giving the strand items. Like there's definitely more loot to be had there, but overall it's also just way less of a pain in the ass to want to engage with that content. And that's a good thing. This is a good thing for the game. This is what we wanted, right? When T17s were originally announced to us, right? Their whole idea was not about creating the next level of juiced mapping. What they were going for with T17s was that they needed a way to give us effectively Uber boss guardians, quote unquote, right? Uber boss guardians. Because at the time of the creation of T17s, the problem that they were trying to solve was that regular bosses had their value completely somehow both destroyed and inflated simultaneously by the collision of their loot pool and their like access with their Uber variant, right? If you wanted to run Uber Exarch, for example, or if you wanted to run regular Exarch, you were paying Uber Exarch prices for regular Exarch because his fragment is the same, and there's just a keystone difference, right? You would turn on the keystone, and suddenly Uber Exarch would be in your map, or it'd be like your boss instead of regular Exarch. And that creates a value problem on both the SSF and the trade side, right? It completely devalues regular killing of Exarch, but even in SSF or private leagues, you ask the question, why bother killing Exarch if I can avoid it and just use this on killing Ubers instead? Same resource, multiple uses, you'd rather use it for the more efficient use. That's all there is to it. So 17s were supposed to solve that problem by separating the Ubers out and giving us new maps with quote new bosses, right? It turns out they're just repurposed and buffed versions of existing bosses in the game that we then fight to get, the fragments of those fights a la Guardians and Simp maps, right? And I think with 16.5s taking this weird role of juiced mapping that 17s had, we will now have the proper split that I think we were supposed to have originally. T17s can live out the role as a guardian map, quite frankly. If you look at the price of T17s in trade right now, it looks like slightly more expensive guardians. Kind of reminds me of when like the Conquerors are in flavor over the other Guardians. You pay just a little bit more because you're doing Conqueror rotos instead of Guardian rotos because it's more efficient through destructive play stuff, right? You just get 10 ways every so often, and that makes their price go up so that people pay a little bit more for it, right? You get the same idea in 17s. It's just instead of doing destructive play farming, it's now you're farming 17s to farm the fragments for the boss. You're no longer running 17s purely for the loot. They still give a ton of loot, by the way. Do not get that twisted at all. But their primary role is now that of a guardian, that of providing access to Ubers, which puts the value where it's supposed to be in all ecosystems. And then that means that T16.5s are our big juiced mapping, where we have a much wider plethora, a wider suite of maps to choose from. We have control over the div cards in our maps via the scrying system added last league or 2 leagues ago, right? We have all of those elements of control that we're used to having when we do juiced mapping, better rolling schemas, better 8 mod printing, right? All of the stuff that we want from that we had already in our previous level of juice mapping that we get now in the newest level of it. This is fantastic. Quite frankly. And that's all of my thoughts, really. It was really cool to talk about this with chat yesterday and realize that 16.5s, while I initially dreaded it on entry, turned out to be the solution to our problem over that 17s gave us. They managed to, quote, do something about T17s without actually having to do anything about T17s initially, right? They might still do some things to 17s. Who knows? Maybe next league they do make some changes and it completely invalidates all the thoughts in this video. Who knows, right? But they managed to, quote, solve the problem without having to actually destroy the identity of 17s at all. And that's awesome, right? Huge fan. Like I said, I have other videos coming down the line, so if you're interested in any of those or you have any thoughts, subscribe so you can see more of the videos, notifications to know when they come through. Drop some comments. Let me know your thoughts about this topic. If you want to get involved in more discussions like this, I have these on stream when I am streaming, which I am still kind of figuring out a schedule right now, as my body did some weird things and messed up my schedule just a little bit, but I'm kind of rocking with the new schedule. So it just might be it might just be like late night America's, talking like times that are basically like work times for like Australia and whatnot. Who knows? I'm kind of figuring it all out still, as my preferences keep shifting and all that stuff. Anywho, check it out on stream if you want, or you can come to the Discord. It's a cool community there, all that stuff. Thank you for watching. I'll see you on the next one. Peace.